Hello there. It is a pleasure to meet you.
Likewise. So what is this interview that you wanted to hold with one such as me?
I wanted to talk to you about the history behind the Gravationist, and the whole gravation of purgatory.
Is that so? And what exactly do you wish to know? And why are you bothering asking me these questions?
Well, I'm going to ask you questions. And, well, you can decide if you wish to skip certain questions. But also, the reason for this is because it seems not everyone is too familiar with the history of our past. Mainly with the new generation, but also from lost history that didn't make it on the book.
Very well then. Go ahead and ask me what you wish to ask me. But before we begin though, what will you do with this information?
Some of our kind are not aware of what has happened in the past, and some aren't too familiar with what's currently going on.
Then you may proceed with your interview.
Excellent. So, first question. The Wapadement era was the main era that introduced the artifacts, as well as vampirism. What do you know of the Wapadement era? And what are these artifacts that were left behind? And how did they come to be?
The Wapadement era was the beginning of our kind. The artifacts that were found were the very same artifacts that were being used against us. The only artifact that wasn't used against us was the enrichment artifact, also known as the vampirism artifact. Now, for how these artifacts came to be, it is a strange mystery that even we haven't fully figured out. It is believed that it was left behind by the Overgrowers. Now, these beings are known to us as aliens, as they left behind some strange equipment, but rarely have we uncovered any sort of remains.
You mentioned enrichment. Was that what we were originally called before obtaining the name of vampires?
Correct. We were called enrichments instead of vampires originally. Now, during the medieval times, that's when humans began to call us vampires. We aren't too sure where they obtained the name, but we earned that title because of our nature taking blood from our victims. Some claim we aren't anything like vampires because of the non-traditional ways of our kind, whatever that means.
Does the name vampire mean anything to you? Or how do you view vampirism as a whole, considering we came from an artifact that was the result of the plague of 743?
The name is a reminder of what humans did to us for centuries. Most of those that returned had that name already in their mind. And for how we view vampirism, well, some consider us to be more alien than vampire, which hints at why we were originally called enrichments. But I don't see it that way. I believe that we are a new species, created for a purpose, not some random being from another planet.
Next question. The Lord and Lady is said to be the first vampires that ever existed, and were both born from different families. Is there any record of their past lives?
They weren't the first vampires that existed. It was their parents that were the first. For the Lord, he had an older sister, and the Lady was an only child. Now, with that being said, the first vampires did not know how vampirism worked. They were simply forced to be in the same cave that the vampirism artifact happened to be in. They happened to get infected with the vampirism, but at the time, neither the Lady nor the Lord were born yet, and both of these families were simply friends that went into a cave to find a new home after natural disasters destroyed the places they lived in before. All the remaining ancient humans were lost and disbanded after these events. reason they ever survived in the caves was because of their undying craving of blood. The caves had significant wildlife surrounded them, so they would come out at night to hunt. Unfortunately, 10 years later, the vampire families would perish from the lack of blood, but before the adults died, they fed all the remaining blood they were storing to the Lord and the Lady, and ever since those two learned to survive together, and they traveled far away from the cave in search of more blood.
Amazing. Who knew that these two would have the capability to survive at a very young age? I'm guessing natural instincts help them. But my question is, what were ancient humans? And why didn't their families go out to find more blood?
Ancient humans were the first humans that ever existed. They were considered to be very tall. Because of the enrichment era, the oxygen levels used to be much higher than those that we have now, meaning that everything alive in that time would have been bigger or taller or longer or whatever. And of course, with the vampirism artifact being spawned during that era, that would be the reason why it would alter the gene pool of the vampires such that anyone born from that lineage would also match the DNA from back then. So yes, that is why we vampires are so tall. Also, the reason the Lord and the Lady couldn't find any more blood was because, well, the animal population had significantly decreased. Not only had the climate changed a bit, but the Lord and the Lady's parents hunted all the animals. They were all dead, and so there were no animals left. They had to leave. Their parents were so afraid of the outside world, the Lord and the Lady couldn't even tell time well. They never even learned to tell solar time, so they couldn't know whether it was night or day. And so after the parents died, the Lord and the Lady had to take the chance to leave and go somewhere else, or they would end up like the ignoramuses of parents too.
Well, that seems to wrap up the Wapadement era questions. The next ones I have for you are medieval questions, if you don't mind.
Certainly. I don't mind answering these questions as long as they are mostly appropriate.